The housing market right now is a real puzzle. On one hand, you've got buyers finally starting to creep back into the picture. But on the other, you have this huge wave of sellers who are just giving up and pulling their homes off the market. It's a total tug of war, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at first glance. So what in the world is going on? Let's dig in and unpack it. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out these two conflicting trends. Then, we'll look at the evidence for why buyers are stepping up and contrast that with why sellers are stepping back. After that, we'll put it all together to see what this means for the market stability and, of course, the big one, the future of affordability. All right, first things first. We've got to set the stage here. The current market really does feel like it's living in two different worlds at the exact same time. And this really gets to the heart of it. On one side of the rope, you have buyers. Pulling with a little more strength, we're seeing more contracts getting signed. But on the other side, you've got sellers, digging in their heels and pulling back by taking their homes off the market. It's a perfect stalemate. So, let's start with the buyer side of the story. It kind of feels like a little glimmer of hope, right? But is this for real? Let's take a look. Okay, so the first piece of evidence we've got for this buyer comeback is this number, 1.9%. That's the rise in pending home sales for October. Now, I know 1.9% isn't going to blow your socks off, but after a long period of things being so flat, any upward movement is a big deal. It tells us that some buyers are out there, finding a way to make it work. But hold on a second. We've got to ask, is this just a flash in the pan? Well, if you look at how the real experts on the ground are feeling, things get a little murky. And this chart right here shows you exactly why there's some hesitation. Look at this. The Realtor Confidence Index is actually down. Only 17% of realtors expect more buyer traffic in the next few months. That's lower than last month, and it's lower than this time last year. So the folks on the front lines, they're not exactly popping the champagne just yet. So what does this all add up to? Well, economist Adi Takushi has a really great way of putting it. The market isn't stalling out, it's stabilizing. It's like the engine isn't dead, but it's not revving up either. It's just idling, thanks to a tiny, tiny improvement in affordability that's just enough to keep things from grinding to a complete halt. All right, now let's flip to the other side of this tug of war. And honestly, this part is even more fascinating. Why on earth are so many sellers just giving up and walking away? Get a load of this number from Redfin. 85,000. That's how many sellers literally pulled their homes off the market in September alone. And let's be super clear, these homes didn't sell. The owners just said, you know what, forget it, and delisted them. That's a massive retreat. And if you thought 85,000 was a lot, check this out. That's a 28% jump in delistings from just 1 year ago. In fact, we haven't seen numbers this high for a September in 8 years. This is not some random fluctuation, folks. This is a real trend. So the big question is, why? Why are they backing out? Well, it's a mix of things. For a lot of them, their house has just been sitting there forever. We're talking an average of 100 days on the market. Others are just refusing to budge on their price because they're still dreaming of those crazy pandemic-era bidding wars. And for some, there's a very real fear they might actually lose money if they sell right now. And this chart, this tells us a really interesting part of the story. Take a look at that big slice. Over a third of the sellers who are pulling out bought their homes really recently, in just the last 2 to 5 years. Yep, they're the pandemic-era buyers. And Redfin's economist Asad Khan explains it perfectly. These folks who bought in the middle of that frenzy still have those sky-high prices stuck in their heads. They remember a time when they held all the cards, and they just can't bring themselves to negotiate with today's buyers, who actually, want to negotiate. Now, it's really important to draw a line here. This isn't everybody. You've got your longtime homeowners, and they're a totally different story. They're often selling for big life reasons, retirement, downsizing, things you can't really put off. They're usually a lot more motivated and realistic about today's market. Okay, so let's put these two pieces together. We have buyers dipping their toes back in the water and sellers yanking their listings. What does all this pushing and pulling actually mean for the housing market as a whole? Well, it's all about finding a new middle ground. And what we're left with is a market that's, it's kind of stuck. It's found this weird state of equilibrium. It's not crashing, but it's sure not taking off either. It's just a classic standoff with buyers hoping for a deal and sellers who absolutely refuse to give them one. Nobody's really winning right now. So, given this delicate standoff, where do we go from here? Let's peek over the horizon and talk about the biggest elephant in the room: affordability. And here's a pretty sobering thought from economist Lisa Sturtevant. She basically says, get used to it. These affordability problems aren't just a phase, they're going to be a defining feature of the housing market for years to come. This isn't a quick fix. And this really hits the nail on the head. Look, even if mortgage rates come down a bit, which would be great, it doesn't magically solve the core problem. The gap between what people earn and what houses cost is still massive. Closing that gap is going to be a long, slow journey. Which leaves us with this one big question as we look ahead. In this great housing market standoff, with hopeful buyers on one end of the rope and stubborn sellers on the other, who is going to blink first? The answer to that is probably going to shape where this market goes for everyone.